From KUNC and the NPR network, this is In The NoCo. I'm Erin O'Toole. It's easy to look at college students and think they're doing fine. You might picture them hanging out with friends, going to football games on the weekends, maybe occasionally hitting the library or pulling an all-night study session. But reality shows a different and far less carefree picture for many. Federal data shows that nearly a quarter of the nation's college students struggle with getting enough nutritious food. That's 3.8 million students, including thousands in Colorado. And being hungry makes it harder to focus on school. In response, most of Colorado's colleges and universities maintain food pantries or other services to help students who struggle to pay for food. Jason Gonzalez, who covers higher education for Chalkbeat, Colorado, recently spent time at some of these food pantries.
Most of the pantries are non-perishable goods for students to pick up. There are also these mobile markets that will come by. Schools like CU Boulder have them once a month. Students can pick up fresh foods, carrots, celery. They can also pick up meat in some cases.
So how do these pantries and mobile markets make a difference for students who struggle to pay their bills, especially at a moment when inflation has driven food prices up and officials want to make college more accessible to students from different income levels? Jason talked to me about what he learned.
A lot of students who struggle with food insecurity, who are trying to just get through school, they sometimes skip meals. They don't have the ability to get a meal and buy a meal. So those kind of things really make the day better for students, allow them to concentrate and stay on campus if they want to study, go to office hours if they need, instead of worrying about where their next meal is.
Let's dive into that a little more, because you mentioned more schools are offering these mobile markets for students. How do they work, and how do they go beyond what the food pantry offers?
Yeah, so like I said, fresh food is one of the big things. And so what will happen is they'll just park in the parking lot and they'll say, hey, it's open for any student. Come get some food. Actually, the students can pick up enough for whoever is in their household as well, because a lot of students, especially at the community college level, have kids at home or they're providing for family at home. And so they can pick up as much as they need. They don't put any limits on the food, except for meat, which is a little bit more limited. And Aurora specifically pays about $3,000 per food truck per visit for its two campuses.
Okay.
And just really tries to allow students to do that shopping, make them feel like it's more of a shopping experience than sort of a handout.
What surprised you the most as you worked on this story, Jason?
I would say that of that 3.8 million students nationwide who have some food insecurity, I think the biggest piece of this is that 2.2 million of those students had low food insecurity. So they ate less than they should or skipped meals altogether. I knew this was a problem. I knew that schools had been grappling with this for years, but I really didn't think about how many of those students made that tough decision of going hungry because they just didn't have the resources.
Right.
They had to skip out on meals. They made those tough decisions, say, hey, family first or school first, and just had to struggle through the day. So I know it was a distraction. I know it was tough for students, but I didn't know so many were making those even bigger choices and just didn't have what they need to get through.
Pulling back to look at the bigger trends, I wonder if this is a good sign in some ways, as colleges work to open their doors to more students from more income levels. How much of this is a sign of how the student body has changed at Colorado universities?
In some ways, this has always been a big problem for schools, and it is getting more eyes on it now. I think the pandemic really placed a lot of emphasis on student need, especially around food insecurity, but other needs such as mental health or childcare or transportation. There were a lot of resources made available by the federal government for colleges to really assist students and help them get through college. So I think it's always been there, but there's a lot more eyes on it now. But I will also say that because of inflation around food, we're hearing more and more that more students need food assistance. So even though it's been there, it is growing.
Jason, for your reporting, you, in addition to talking with advocates and education professionals, you talked with students who live with food insecurity. I'm wondering if there was a story or someone who really stuck with you that you could share with us.
Yeah, I featured as part of the story Taina Garcia Reyes, and she is a student at the Community College of Aurora, and she's used some of these services. She's been connected to federal food assistance, SNAP, through the college, but she's also used those food resources to then get connected to other resources. So she's now has a work study, and she actually helps other students get connected to food resources, to mental health resources, whatever services they need. She's there to help them out. So she's both someone who's using this and someone who is an advocate for other students, and saying that this is okay to use and it's okay to go be a part of this.
I think that's something that comes across in your story. You talk about allowing struggling students to retain a sense of dignity. How often did dignity come up as you talk to people for this story?
Quite a bit. I mean, it can be sometimes embarrassing or tough to talk about when you have food insecurity. And making it something that is just an everyday part of life really removes that stigma around that, and says to students, we want to help you. We want everybody to succeed. And we're gonna make sure that you're fed and you're taken care of. So dignity was a big thing throughout all of this, from the staff at CCA, staff at MSU Denver, and even Ty talking about it and saying, it is hard to talk about these things. And it is hard to accept that sometimes you don't have food on the table, but it is okay to be able to use these resources, because it's just part of what students go through.
Jason Gonzalez covers higher education for Chalkbeat, Colorado. We'll include a link to his reporting in our show notes and at kunc.org. And just a quick note before we get out of here, we love hearing from our listeners, like Judith. She reached out after hearing our recent episode on how technology may be driving up the cost of your homeowner's insurance. She wanted to highlight that part of what makes rising premiums especially painful is that if you have a mortgage, you're required to have homeowner's insurance. So unlike other services, if the cost of your policy goes up, you don't have the option of simply going without. Judith, we appreciate you listening, and we thank you for being a part of the conversation on this important story. If you have comments or questions, feel free to drop us a line. Send an email or a voice memo to noco@kunc.org. That's NOCO@kunc.org. And that's it for us today on In The NoCo. I'm Erin O'Toole. Thanks so much for listening.